Hailing from Medarot Girls Mission and a successor to the original Arachne-type Hellweaver from Medarot Duel. It is ARN01, Arachno-Spider. With a kit of Hyper Laser, Power Missile, Attack Trap, Multi-Legs, and the leg ability of Trapper, which buffs all leg stats, minus armor and heavy limit, for every trap applied to the field. Now, as another returnee from Medarot Girls Mission, the implementation of Arachno-Spider and Whip World at time of recording does mean that we are nearing almost the total completion of Girls Mission's roster in Medarot S. And might I say that, in contrast to most other spider types in general, which tend to focus on passive aggression or trapping in any sort of degree, minus, of course, Yak Spider, of course. Arachno-Spider basically takes all of that and throws it out the window as an extremely forwardly aggressive Arachne type that, while she's on the field, is going to be very forward on the fact that she is going to be, or very close to being, the DPS. Hyper Laser on the head part is an optic attribute skill that gets a times 1.5 damage bonus at a 30% charge and a double damage bonus at 100% charge. But what makes this particular laser different from the basic one is the fact that Hyper Laser also packs Defense Ignore, which means that when attacking the enemy, it is going to bypass completely and entirely the enemy's resistance stats when damaging them. So this means that if they have an extremely high shoot resist when you use Hyper Laser, well, that doesn't count because they don't have it anymore as far as Hyper Laser is concerned. However, it is also worth noting that in trade of having that Defense Ignore, you are also not able to dodge or defend in your cooldown. So a little bit of caution is advised if you are planning to make use of the skill, and given that it is CG reliant, does mean that you may want to spend 1 or 2 turns charging before you use it, since a base power of 1665 isn't too shabby, but it is also worth noting that if you want to make the most of it, build up a charge first before you use it. Power Missile on the right arm is a gunpowder attribute skill and an AoE type skill, which means that it will damage all parts of the target and spread the damage equally across them. The only time this does not apply is if the enemy has a stealth or conceal effect active, where they will instead sponge all the damage to the part being targeted. Or, in many cases, if it is a shield intercepting Arachno-Spider, the shield in question will negate the incoming damage and will soak all of it up. But it also does mean that as a power missile, it gets a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as the user's legs are intact, at the cost that, much like Hyper Laser, has a no dodge, no defend cooldown penalty. So, again, Arachno-Spider, just between these two skills alone, is extremely forwardly aggressive, and a little bit of caution is advised if you are planning to use Arachno-Spider, and just make sure that she's covered and protected and nothing slips between the cracks to counter her. Attack Trap on the left arm is a... how do I put this? It's a new skill, but it's not. And the way it was explained, both in the coverage, is the fact that it's actually the Attack Trap Metaforce, which is a non-discriminatory passive-aggressive trap that will damage and trigger any time an enemy uses an attack-type skill. That can be shooting or melee in this case. The difference with this one is that unlike the Metaforce version, which only gets 1 charge, and that's basically it, Attack Trap as a skill, and as a setup skill no less in this case, gets 3 charges. So this means that if you aren't able to properly counter anything with a proper shooting or a melee trap in this case, Attack Trap is a very solid, universal type of a trap in this case, and kind of calls back to the early days as well, where traps really weren't all that specific, that you can use that'll counter basically anything. And worth noting that because it works against both shooting and melee, you can use it in just about any situation, as well as for passive aggression and even just some coverage, or as a deterrent in some cases from certain enemies trying to attack you. Multi-legs means that Arachno-Spider will have relatively decent coverage on all terrains with no real drawback or penalty, at the cost of being just a little bit tankier in trade of losing a little bit of evade and mobility. But that doesn't necessarily hurt Arachno-Spider in this case. With a base mobility of 851, she's definitely off to a good start in the speed department before any other Medarot or terrain or speed boost or boost chip boost come into play. An evade of 734 is not terrible, but also not great either, as this does mean that she will not be dodging or grazing very often, if at all. But given how extremely forwardly aggressive she is with Hyper Laser and Power Missile, I'm not really going to hold that against her because I think dodging or grazing is kind of the last thing on her mind. A melee resist of 1115 and a shoot resist of 1249 are also very nice too, in that nice little sweet spot that you want to be with your damage reduction. So she's going to be able to reduce incoming damage both from up close and from afar fairly decently, as long as they don't hit her too terribly hard or catch her in a no dodge, no defend penalty. When it comes to armor, she is actually quite bulky though, which does kind of trade off for the middling kind of sweet spot damage resist stats that she has. With a head HP of 3899, arms at 3779 apiece, and legs at nearly 4400, she is going to be a very tough spider to squish because she has fairly solid damage reduction, like I said, but also very good bulk in the HP department, which is going to make putting her down a little bit of a challenge. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Arachno-Spider kind of a middle-of-the-road 6.5 out of 10, primarily on the grounds that, while Attack Trap does sound very nice, and that can be fantastic in a lot of different situations, she unfortunately is not a very self-synergetic build. Hyper Laser does require CG in order to use effectively, especially with the Defense Ignore packing a no dodge, no defend penalty on cooldown, and Power Missile also packing that as well, means that nearly any attack you choose to use with Arachno-Spider is going to be leaving her wide open no matter what. Even with Attack Trap serving as a way to kind of bolster that or dissuade enemies from trying to touch her, she's still going to be taking a lot of punish damage if anything catches her between a shield or on her cooldowns. However, the leg ability of Trapper is nice though, as it means anytime that she does actively set up an attack trap or reset an attack trap or reinforce it, her leg stats will go up progressively up to 5 stacks. So that means that for every trap she places, she will get progressively faster, just a little bit more dodgy, and a little bit better on that overall damage reduction. So it does tie itself back, but that still does not fix the issue of the CG sustain she requires to use Hyper Laser effectively. It is also worth noting that neither of her 2 attacks have a success stat of over 1,000, which means she's going to be shooting fairly blind, and that is going to be another big warning for anyone choosing to use her. As mixed parts, though, I do have to rate her just a little bit higher at a 7.5 out of 10 for these same reasons. While Hyper Laser, Power Missile, Attack Trap, and Leg Ability of Trapper are all fantastic skills you can use just about anywhere, herself as a pure set is kind of weird in its synergy, and you probably do well to benefit from something that can make use of at least 1 or 2 skills with a better synergy, such as, say, Hyper Laser with something that's more charge sustain with a leg ability of auto charge, or even heroic in some cases, Power Missile for something like Bomber if you have it, or Attack Trap. Attack Trap and Trapper actually will work fairly solidly together, but in any kind of passive aggression you can use very solidly, whether you use Attack Trap or the leg ability of a Trapper, respectively.